Welcome to the Conscious Conception Show with me, Sue Ritchie. This show will take you from confusion to clarity, confidence and emotional healing to a joyful pregnancy. This is the place where we uncover the real truth about fertility and why preparing for conception, mind, body and soul, is more important than ever. With honest, empowering conversations, we'll explore the hidden factors impacting fertility and how a holistic approach can help you take back control of your journey. Whether you're trying naturally, navigating IVF, or just starting out, know this: you're not alone, you're not broken, and you're already on your way. So let's walk this path together. Hi, welcome to the Conscious Conception Show today. I'm Sue Ritchie, holistic health and fertility specialist. And you know what? It's always such a joy to have you join me on the show. And today I'm going to be talking about actually an important factor that has an impact on fertility, actually for both men and women. But sadly, all too often, it isn't something that your medical professional, your consultant, is going to be talking to you about, particularly when things don't seem to be happening for you. But you know what? We're going to be talking about stress and its impact on fertility. It seems quite a small thing, but actually, you know what? In today's modern busy world where, we're all rushing around trying to do a million things in 24 hours, it's really something that probably affects, I would say, all of us at some point in life. And, stress can be a situation where, you have a response to a particular thing, at something that's happened, and it's there for a short time and then it's gone, and that's all fine. The problem is that, as I discovered for myself a few years ago, so often stress can come and actually start to be, our normal operating mode, if you like. And, it's incredible. I found it quite surprising just how easily we can slip into that mode of being actually continuously stressed, but actually we're not really aware of it. And stress, at a mental level is one thing, but when you're stressed at a mental level, but there are also, underneath in the body, there are things going on that we're not obviously aware of. And, this, trying to conceive should be, and we would like it to be, a phase that's joyful and happy and, and enjoyable. But, all too often for so many couples today, it really, becomes stressful, it becomes emotional and even exhausting. I know, especially when, month after month, you're waiting, you're tracking cycles, you're really hoping for, good news. And all of that situation can really, silently, if you like, increase the stress levels. And, those stress levels can directly affect your fertility. And that's why I really want to talk about the whole thing about stress, how it impacts your fertility. But more importantly, what I really wanted to cover is, how you can actually reduce it, what actions can you take to actually, manage it so much better in your life so that that will help your whole reproductive health, if you like. So stress, well, what is it? Well, stress is really your body's natural response to pressure, so physical, emotional, mental pressure. And when it becomes chronic, it really has an impact on disrupting your hormonal balance and those hormones that regulate, ovulation, sperm production, and just generally your reproductive health. Now, when stress is intermittent, actually it can be quite a good thing for us. It gets us motivated, gets us taking action. But it's when stress becomes a sort of normal thing and it's a continuous situation that it really becomes a problem, not only for our overall health, but also for our fertility. You see, when we're stressed, what happens is that our fight and flight system switches on. And that's a primeval and ancient system that runs in our bodies. And it's there to help us run away quickly from danger. Just imagine yourself as a caveman, going back to those days. And, you're walking in a forest and you suddenly notice this saber-toothed tiger hiding behind a tree, thinking you look like a nice, tasty dinner. Well, at that moment, when you realize that, you might end up as its dinner, your fight and flight system will kick in to really get you out of that danger, help you to run as fast as you possibly can, to get away from danger. And then after the danger's disappeared, you're saved, your life is safe, your whole system calms down again. But the problem we have is that when that fight and flight system response gets triggered, any system in your body, if you like, that isn't necessary to help you run as fast as you can to get away from that danger gets shut down. And one of those systems, unfortunately, is your reproductive system. And you know what? Our bodies are incredibly intelligent. So, our bodies, when you're in a situation when you're, potentially going to lose your life, it's not going to say, well, actually, you know what? I think this is a good time for us to create a new life. And that's what constant stress actually does to our bodies. And that's why, you can have scenarios where your period can be late. You're experiencing high levels of stress, particularly for an extended period of time. But stress also has a negative impact on our gut, and it can disrupt the whole balance of our gut microbiome. And given that the gut is the place where, many hormones that run the body are managed and balanced, and particularly estrogen being one of those, this also has an effect, if you like, on your ability to conceive. And stress isn't just, something that impacts conception when you're looking to conceive naturally. It has an impact if you're if you're going for IVF treatment as well. So what are the things that, what does it do, if you like? What does stress do for women's fertility first? Let's talk about that, and I'll go on and talk about how it affects male fertility. So the key thing is it disrupts ovulation because high stress levels increase the levels of cortisol in your body, and those interfere with hormones like estrogen and progesterone. So that can lead to sort of delayed ovulation, irregular periods, and, even in some instances, stopping ovulation altogether. It also impacts your hormonal balance, and so disturbing hormonal signals that are needed for conception. And it also can affect the whole process of implantation. So chronic stress can actually reduce the blood flow to your uterus, making, the whole process of implantation much more difficult. Excuse me. But as I said, stress doesn't only impact on female fertility, it impacts on male fertility as well. And, I think it's a sad thing that, so much more needs to be talked about around male fertility because, at the end of the day, it does take two to tango, as I always say. And, male fertility is just as important when it comes to conception, but also in terms of having a healthy baby. So, what are the impacts on male fertility then? Well, when men get stressed, it can lower testosterone levels, and that can lead to reduced sperm count, poor sperm motility, and abnormal sperm shape as well. And one of the things, like with stress, and this applies to both men and women, is that when we get stressed, it has an effect on our libido. So obviously, you wanted to get intimate as often as you perhaps need to. But also for men, it can have an effect on erectile function. And obviously, those indirectly, have an effect on conception as well. I think the sad thing is that, the whole thing around stress is it so easily can really sort of, I suppose, get into a downward spiral because particularly, when things aren't happening for you, you know, it's not easy to, break that cycle. So you're stressed, so it's not happening, so you get more stressed, and it really becomes a vicious cycle, really, a vicious circle. And that's why, I feel it's very important to really sort of find support if you're in this sort of situation. And you know what? It's not about getting rid of stress totally. Um, that's, let's look at life in reality, and that would be really unrealistic for that to happen. But the key thing is really to find ways to manage stress effectively. And, I do want to point out that stress isn't the sort of sole cause of fertility problems, but, it can have a worsening effect on existing fertility issues, which then, of course, basically reduces the chances of conceiving naturally and with fertility treatments like IVF. So stress can also have an impact on our lifestyle, and those lifestyle habits as well can then also have a knock on effect. So, when you're stressed, quite often you find it difficult to sleep. You're not sleeping properly, or maybe you're working long hours and you're not actually giving enough priority to sleep. It can affect your way of eating. You get poor diet, you get poor habits, eating habits and behavior. But also, it can lead to sort of increase in alcohol consumption because, for many people, finding out they find alcohol really helps them relax. So, when you're stressed, you want to relax more. And so, that can sort of come into the picture as well. You might, do more smoking or start smoking. And the other thing, of course, is if you're, maybe working long hours at work, that one of the things that goes down the priority, if you like, of what you need to do is, physical activity, because you'd think you can't find the time to do it. And of course, physical activity is really important as well because it does help to reduce stress. So I just wanted to just sort of share with you a little bit about my own personal experience around stress, because it's something that I'm well aware of and I've struggled with a lot in my life. And I really want to share it because I think it might help you in understanding maybe some factors for yourself about, you know, what causes you to get stressed. Because for me, I've learned that by, really taking the time to understand what the triggers are for me, really has helped me, with awareness and has helped me to manage my stress much more effectively. So I think it's, taking some time to actually sort of think about what is the situations when you get stressed, what causes it, can be really helpful. And for me, I feel that for a lot of people, not only myself, it's not being in control of something. And I think that, many of us need to remain in control or would like to be in control of everything in life. But, the reality, of course, is that, we just can't do that. It would be impossible. And, and sadly, of course, the whole process of conception isn't something that we can actually directly control, although we can obviously do things to help it. So recognizing that and really sort of letting go of the need to be in control and just trusting um, can be a really helpful way to shift your mindset around it. For instance, do you find yourself constantly busy? you know, you're not able to say no, so you take on more than you really can handle or cope with at a time. Certainly, this was a big thing for me. And two things that I learned was that one was that I was a people pleaser. That's why I didn't want to say no, because I always wanted to people please people. And secondly, the constant busyness for me was really quite an eye opener in realizing that it was really about showing my self worth and my self value. So, one of the things that, I wonder with do you find yourself actually setting yourself incredibly high standards? And, I know that one of the things that I was really bad at was asking for help. And, so often we seem to think that, asking for help means that we're a failure. We failed in some way, but, that's far, far, far from the truth. And the reality is, when we reach out to other people for help, people don't see us as failing. They're actually really pleased that we've reached out because, I'm sure you've experienced this when you've been able to help somebody, you know, it really makes you feel good, doesn't it, that you've actually been able to help somebody else. So, well, by not reaching out for help, we're denying that pleasure, if you like, to other people. So certainly reaching out for help doesn't mean you're a failure at all. And I think that the key thing was that the more aware I became of the things that actually trigger trigger a stress response, um, it really helped me to, start manage my stress levels, and also looking at changing my self-talk away from, always being in the negative, always seeing things as a lack, and shifting it to be want to be more positive, if you like. And I wonder if I could encourage you to, maybe later on today, this evening, whatever, wherever time zone you're in, is to take a little bit of quiet time away for yourself. Just take away from everything else and just switch off, and just, take that time to feel into, you know, what it is that makes you feel stressed, what makes you get stressed. And maybe, do some journaling around it, because that can help as well in really trying to uncover and understand. Because, I know from my own experience that the more I understood about what actually causes me to be stressed, the more I was able to actually, shift into putting management processes in place. So, key things now. What can you do to reduce stress in your life? Well, this one might seem like a strange one, but actually it's quite important. And it's actually about eating a healthy, natural, whole food diet. Because when our body's actually getting all the vitamins, minerals, and nutrition it needs, it functions better and we get less anxious. So that's key. A second thing would be practicing daily meditation. I'm sure that's fairly obvious. You probably all already know that. Practicing mindfulness. But one of the things I found incredibly useful is the whole process of doing some deep breathing. And, you only need to do these things for 10 to 15 minutes a day to really help reduce cortisol levels in your body. And a good deep breathing exercise, which you can do actually, just for 5 minutes. You can do it 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes at lunchtime, even sneak off to the toilets or whatever in the afternoon, and do it again, and maybe do it again before you go to sleep as well. And basically taking a deep breath in through your nose and holding that for a count of six, and holding your breath for six, and then releasing by breathing through your mouth very slowly for another count of six. And, as I said, it's something that you can practice quite easily at different times through the day. Exercise, of course, is really important as well, but gentle exercise, walks in nature, yoga, swimming, things like that, which really helps to improve the blood circulation and reduce stress. And you certainly don't want to be doing, intense busting a gut workouts because they can have a negative impact on hormonal balance. Sleep, of course, getting good sleep, making sure you get 7 to 8 hours quality sleep. What I recommend is, switching off from the screen, switching off from scrolling on social media about an hour before you go to bed so that you really then, have a much more relaxing sleep. And, setting boundaries so that you do say no to social pressures and, stop comparing yourself and your situation with others because every couple, every person has a unique situation for themselves. What you might not realize is that things like caffeine and sugar can cause more anxiety in the body. So really, cutting down on caffeine and sugar during the day it will be really beneficial. Spend time on hobbies. If you don't currently have one, perhaps you could start one. Things like coloring, doing some painting, some creative activities, doing puzzles. They're all a way of actually doing meditating, without actually sort of lying there and having to empty your head of all your thoughts. And one thing I found really useful is also, you know, uh, the whole practice of gratitude. And I think until you start doing it, you don't realize quite how powerful a process that is. And before you go to bed at night, what I highly recommend is I think so often we tend to, at that time of night, go through all the things we haven't done during the day. So, what I'd really recommend is stop doing that and focus on all of the things that you have achieved during the day. And some of those can be the smallest things, but what I would really highly recommend is you list all those out, but you give yourself some really good praise for what you have achieved. And writing down 3 things that you're grateful for in your life. And to do that every night. And again, focus on the small things. Um, you know, maybe your husband made you a cup of tea or brought you a drink or something like that. It doesn't have to be the big things. Just focus on the small things. And to me, this one is really important. And I think, so often, particularly as women, one thing that we do forget is to be kind to ourselves and, make sure that the talk you give to yourself is kind and caring and gentle. And, if you wouldn't say what you're saying to yourself to a friend, then stop doing it to you. So getting stress under control and well managed by really sort of, embedding these calming strategies in your daily life, it's not only going to help you increase your chances of conceiving, but it's also going to become really beneficial for both you and baby during pregnancy and after the baby is born. And it's going to put you in a good stead to really manage, those inevitable ups and downs that I'm afraid, life always tends to throw at us. So if there's one thing that I would like you to really take away from today, and that would be to just start with picking 1 or 2 things that I've suggested and start bringing those into your daily practice. Because every little bit will help to reduce your stress. And if you feel, like any support, I'm here. You just need to reach out. And I'd like to thank you so much for joining me today. We're coming to the end of the show now. And, if anything in this episode's resonated with you and, somebody who you think might get great value from it, please do share it with them. And if you're ready to take a more conscious, holistic approach to your fertility journey, I would like to walk that path with you. You see, we're not just talking about conception, we're talking about creating healthy, happy couples who are, supported, informed, and empowered to become healthy, happy parents. Because to me, that's the heart of it all. Creating healthy, happy couples to make healthy, happy babies. So thank you once again for joining me today. And until next time, the next episode will be next month. Please, stay curious, stay hopeful, and be kind to yourself and take really good care of yourself. Thank you for listening to the Conscious Conception Show with me, Sue Ritchie. To stay informed and inspired, be sure to tune in every third Tuesday of the month at 7:30 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Subscribe so you never miss an episode, and sign up for my newsletter for helpful tips on boosting fertility and preparing for positive, empowered parenthood. If you're ready for more support, connect with me on social media on Instagram and LinkedIn and at Optimum Fertility, or visit my website at sue-ritchie.com.